a man named Tom suddenly sees the body of a lady named Atlanta wash up on the shore during a huge storm. As he goes down to check what happened, he notices that the lady is still alive, but she's badly injured. He immediately takes her into his lighthouse and tries to help her. But Atlanta wakes up and nearly kills him with her trident because she thinks he wants to hurt her. Tom says he's harmless and that he only just saved her from the shore. "You weren't breathing." Before Atlanta can do anything else, she gets too weak and passes out. Tom then takes care of her injuries, and as she wakes up next, she wonders where she is. She also eats Tom's pet fish, but he still gives her a cup of tea and says that he's already preparing a meal for her. As he eventually sits with her, he asks who she is, and she says she's Queen Atlanta of an underwater world called Atlantis. Queen of Atlantis? After Tom continues to take care of Atlanta, they eventually fall in love and have a baby named Arthur. Unfortunately, it turns out that Atlanta actually ran away from her arranged marriage with a king named Orvax, who now wants her back. He sends his men to find her, and it doesn't take them long to attack Tom's lighthouse. Tom immediately hides Arthur, and Atlanta fights off and kills the soldiers. She then tells Tom that she has to return to Atlantis for his and their son's safety. Tom thinks there has to be another way to keep them safe, but Atlanta says there's none. She adds that she'll come back one day at sunrise. After she leaves, Tom starts taking care of Arthur alone. A few years later, while Arthur is at an aquarium for a school trip, some bullies try to attack him, but a shark suddenly hits the glass wall to scare them off. As the shark continues to hit the wall, Tom surprisingly controls it to stay calm, and it turns out that he can communicate with sea creatures, which leaves everyone shocked. Following this, Atlanta sends a man named Vulko to the surface to train her son to fight and use his powers. Many years later, a young man named Manta leads some pirates, including his dad, Jesse, to invade and hijack a military submarine in the ocean. Before Manta can start negotiating a ransom, a metahuman named Aquaman suddenly attacks the submarine and lifts it to the surface. Manta doesn't understand what's happening, but as he's told that there's a man pushing the submarine, "No, something hit us." He says he knows who it is. Just then, Arthur enters the submarine as Aquaman and beats up the pirates, after which he saves the crew members who have been held captive. Before he leaves, though, Manta attacks Arthur and complains about how he has ruined what was supposed to be a successful mission. Arthur manages to beat him up, but Jesse suddenly shows up and shoots him. The bullet appears to be really powerful, and Arthur falls to the floor immediately. Manta and Jesse look happy to have defeated him, but surprisingly, Arthur stands up and looks okay. He then injures Jesse and decides to leave the pirates inside the submarine. However, before he heads out, Jesse shoots at him again, but Arthur dodges it, and the bullet hits the wall of the submarine. Unfortunately, this allows water to gush into the submarine and displace a huge gas tank to fall on Jesse's leg. Manta quickly tries to rescue his dad, but he's not strong enough to lift the gas tank. He then begs Arthur to help him because he's super strong. "Helping his trap!" But he refuses and says that Jesse deserves to die because he has killed a lot of people. As Arthur leaves, Manta looks terrified because he'll lose his father. He still waits behind to try to help his dad, but Jesse tells Manta to leave so that they won't sink together. He also tells Manta that he needs to stay alive so he can kill Arthur. Manta still doesn't want to leave his dad behind, but Jesse sets off a bomb, and he's forced to leave. Joel. Shortly after, Arthur meets Tom at the shore and greets his dad, who offers to buy him breakfast. As they get to a bar, Tom watches the news and hears about the submarine crew members that Aquaman saved. Tom then looks at his son and says he's proud of what he's doing, but Arthur tries to deny being Aquaman. Tom doesn't believe it, and he tells Arthur that it's good to see him using everything Vulko taught him for the right reasons. He also mentions that Atlanta always knew Arthur was special and that he would unite their two worlds. It's not me. Arthur tells his dad not to bring up the topic, but Tom tells him that he needs to accept that it's what he'll do one day. Arthur says he doesn't owe Atlantis anything because they killed his mom, but Tom says he doesn't know that for sure. Arthur says he knows what happened and that they killed her for marrying Tom and giving birth to a half-breed. Tom then pats his son and tells him to stop blaming himself for what happened. Just then, some men at the bar recognize Arthur as Aquaman. "You that fish boy from the TV?" So they approach him to take selfies because they're huge fans. Elsewhere in Atlantis, the new king, Orm, takes his advisor, Vulko, and some other soldiers to meet with the King of Xebel, Nereus. During the meeting, Orm tells Nereus that he believes it's time to launch an attack on the surface to kill the humans before they come for Atlantis. He mentions that they can't keep letting humans bring their submarines close to Atlantis, but Nereus doesn't think violence is the solution. He adds that the humans will eventually destroy themselves. They will destroy themselves, but Orm says they'll come for Atlantis first. Nereus still has doubts about this plan, and he tells Orm that invading the humans will not be possible unless 4 of the kingdoms in Atlantis agree to join him. Orm says he already has the right kingdoms in mind, but that he needs Nereus's help in convincing them. That is merely a tie. Nereus wonders why Orm is suddenly so interested in fighting the humans, and he asks if it's about becoming the Ocean Master who will lead the greatest army in history. Orm says it's just a title, and that he doesn't care much about it. Nereus doesn't believe him, and he says that Orm might not even be worthy. He adds that there are currently rumors of a half-breed who could lay claim to Orm's throne, but Orm says it's impossible. It then turns out that Orm is Arthur's stepbrother, who was also given birth to by Atlanta. Despite this, Orm hates his brother because he believes he's the reason why their mother was killed. As he tells Nereus that a half-breed cannot sit on the throne, a submarine launches an attack on the meeting ground. Some of Orm's and Nereus' men get killed, and the kings don't like this. Before the attack continues, Orm angrily charges at the submarine and destroys it. He then tells Nereus that they need to take action fast, and the King of Xebel finally agrees to form an alliance with Orm, who says they need to send a warning to the humans. Meanwhile, Tom is already drunk at the bar, so Arthur drags him into his truck so they can head home. Before he leaves, Arthur sees a lady named Mira, who tells him that he has to follow her to Atlantis. Arthur says he's not interested. No thank you, I'm not interested. And that he already told Vulko what he really thinks about the people that killed his mom. Mara then mentions that Orm is about to go to war against the humans, and that they must work together to take him down. Arthur asks how they'll do that, and Mira mentions that the only way he'll win the war and unite the people from different worlds is to return to Atlantis to take his place as the king. Arthur laughs at this suggestion because he knows Orm would never give up the throne. He adds that he has never even been to Atlantis before, and no one there would recognize him as king. Trust me, I'm no king. Mara then says he can change that by finding the lost trident of King Atlan, which he can use to claim his throne and make people respect him. She adds that Vulko has recently found something about the trident's location, and that Arthur needs to come with her so they can work together to find it. Arthur is still uninterested in this, and he leaves her at the parking lot while he drives away. Elsewhere, Orm meets up with Manta and says that even though the submarine was barely operational, it served its purpose. Orm also pays him for faking an attempt to attack Atlantis, but Manta says he wants Aquaman instead because he killed Jesse. Orm doesn't say anything about this, but since their transaction has ended, he leaves. Shortly after, while Arthur is driving Tom home, he suddenly sees some birds flying away from the area. As he then looks at the ocean, he sees that a huge tsunami is heading toward him. He immediately tries to drive really fast, but it's not enough to get past the tsunami. Before anything happens to him, Mara shows up and creates an air pocket around the water so that Arthur can save Tom, who has passed out after getting stuck in the car. As he tries to revive his dad, Mara offers to help, and after he allows her, she uses her powers to save Tom. Just then, they look around to see the damage done by the tsunami, and Mara says it's Orm's doing. This was Orm's doing. She also mentions that the worst is yet to come because Orm is already planning a big war. Following this, Arthur follows Mara and goes to Atlantis for the first time. When they get there, Mara takes him to a place where he meets Vulko, who looks happy to see Arthur in Atlantis after many attempts to bring him there. Arthur then asks about Orm's attack on the surface, and Vulko says it's barely anything compared to what he's planning. Mara asks what provoked it, and Vulko says that a surface ship ambushed Orm and Nereus during their meeting. Arthur says it's impossible because everyone on land thinks Atlantis is not real. However, Vulko says he was there and that the attack has made Nereus form an alliance with Orm. He adds that if Orm gets the support of 2 other nations, he'll have a huge army and become the Ocean Master. He then says that the only way Orm can be stopped is if Arthur dethrones him as soon as possible. You must dethrone him now. Arthur says he's not interested in being king, but Vulko mentions that there's really no other choice. He adds that for the people to respect Arthur and take him as king, he needs to find the lost trident of Atlan. Arthur says he already has his mother's trident, but Vulko says there's something special about the one he needs. As Arthur says that he knows the story behind the trident, Vulko says it's more than just a story. He then narrates how the trident was forged by the greatest weapon masters in history for the first king of Atlantis named Atlan. As Arthur asks what happened to it, so what happened to it? Vulko tells him about a time when Atlantis was the most advanced kingdom on the surface until they got too ambitious and created something that sank them to the bottom of the ocean. Despite this, they were still able to adapt and breathe underwater, but most of the previous residents broke off and formed different kingdoms. Unfortunately, Atlan couldn't bear it, and he lived the rest of his life in a self-imposed exile, with no one ever seeing him or the trident again. Vulko then shows Arthur a recorder found by some archaeologists who believe it contains Atlan's last message to his people, as well as the location of the trident. Arthur asks why they can't just listen to what Atlan recorded, but Vulko says that the recorder is ancient and can only be played using a device in the Deserter Kingdom. Before Arthur collects the recorder, Orm's men find the meeting place and blow it up. Arthur then attacks them, but Mara and Vulko have to leave because they can't be seen with the half-breed. Unfortunately, though, Arthur eventually gets overpowered and arrested. Shortly after, he's taken to meet Orm and is chained to the ground. Orm looks surprised to see his brother in Atlantis, and he says that he's suddenly conflicted about what to do to him, even though he has never liked him. Arthur sounds pissed and tries to attack Orm, but he's unable to do that with his chains. As Orm asks if he's in Atlantis to challenge for the throne, Arthur says he's ready to do that to end his brother's war. Orm looks happy about this, and he accepts the challenge even though Mira and Vulko try to convince him otherwise. Mira mentions that there's no point challenging Arthur because he knows so little about fighting underwater, but Orm says he'll teach his brother a lesson in front of every citizen in Atlantis. Orm adds that if Arthur wins the battle, he'll willingly give up the throne, but if he loses, he'll be killed. You're over. Shortly after, while Arthur is preparing for the battle, Vulko meets up with him and asks why he let Orm bait him into a fight. Arthur says he can take him on, but Vulko warns him that fighting underwater is not the same as fighting on land. Arthur then mentions that he still remembers some of the things Vulko taught him when he was younger. As he shows Vulko what he can do, Arthur suddenly remembers the day his trainer taught him a new move. On that day, Arthur asks Vulko when he'll be taken to meet his mom, but his trainer tells him that Orvax has already sent Atlanta to the Kingdom of the Trench for an execution. Arthur cannot believe this, and he also gets really pissed because he thinks Atlanta was killed because of him. Back in the present day, Orm gives Mara a special bracelet and talks about how he'll defeat his brother. Mara then asks if he thinks Atlanta would want both of them to fight. She also mentions that Orm has gone against most of the things his mom believed in, but the king says that Atlanta was very weak. He also tells Mara not to be like his mother. Don't follow her wake. Almost immediately, Volko shows up with Arthur, and Orm tells his advisor to take his betrothed to the royal box. Arthur is shocked to hear this, because he didn't know that Mira is engaged to Orm, but he doesn't say anything. Just then, Arthur says he can't believe there was a time he couldn't wait to meet his half-brother to encourage him that he's not alone in the world. However, Orm says he doesn't want to kill Arthur, and that he'll give him one chance to head back home and wait for when he attacks the surface dwellers. Arthur says he can't do that, and both men then head to the battleground, where the citizens of Atlantis are already around to watch the fight. As Mira gets to the royal box, she sees a few people inside, including Nereus, who happens to be her dad. Mira says she can't believe her dad wants a war, but Nereus mentions that the surface dwellers attacked them first. He adds that it's time for them to be put in their place. Shortly after, the fight starts. And even though Arthur doesn't start well, he eventually lands a few attacks on Orm. However, it doesn't take long for Orm to get the upper hand. But before he strikes Arthur, someone attacks him and traps him inside an air pocket. Mara then brings her ship to the scene and tells Arthur to join her on board. Following this, they try to leave Atlantis together, but Orm and his men immediately follow them. Orm eventually blows up their ship. But it turns out that they've already escaped and are now fighting inside the mouth of a sea creature who Arthur was able to communicate with. As Orm and his men then leave after thinking they're dead, Mara tells Arthur that they need to get to the Sahara Desert to play Atlan's recording in the Deserter Kingdom. While they're on the plane to the desert, Mara looks sad and says she won't be able to return to Atlantis because of what she did. Arthur says it might not be so bad because she won't have to marry someone she doesn't like. I don't have to marry some tool bird that you're not rose. Despite this, Mara says it feels bad to have abandoned her family and people. Shortly after, Mara's tracker locates the Deserter Kingdom, and they jump out of the plane. Elsewhere, one of Orm's men finds out that the tracker on Mira's bracelet is still on the move in the Deserter Kingdom. Orm immediately instructs his men to go after her and Arthur, but Nereus tells him not to hurt his daughter. Orm says she committed treason, but Nereus says he won't let his daughter be killed. Even though Orm doesn't like the idea of letting Mara go scot-free, he accepts Nereus's request to bring his daughter back safe so that he won't ruin their alliance. My vizier is correct. A while later, Orm meets Manta at the shore and gives him a super weapon, which he's told to use to hunt down and kill Arthur and Mira. He also tells Manta that his best soldiers will accompany him on the mission. As Orm adds that he'll give him a huge reward if he succeeds with the mission, Manta says he's okay with just killing Arthur for revenge. Killing him is my reward. Elsewhere, Mara doesn't find the right entrance to the Deserter Kingdom, and Arthur complains about having to walk in a wasteland. Mara thinks he shouldn't complain because the desert is on land, but Arthur mentions that there are much better places on the surface. He tells Mara that she shouldn't judge the surface without seeing it in its entirety, but she also says he didn't care to find out more about Atlantis before he started hating them. You've judged Atlantis on far less. Shortly after, they eventually find the entrance to the Deserter Kingdom. As they walk around the kingdom's main temple, they see proof that Atlan's trident is real. They also find the device through which the recording can be played. After inserting the recording capsule into the device, a hologram of Atlan appears to them and talks about how his trident holds all the power of Atlantis. He also mentions that in the hands of the one true heir, the trident will unite all the kingdoms above and below. He adds that anyone who wants to get the trident will have to prove their worth by journeying beyond the edge of the world to the hidden sea. He then tells them to look inside a bottle for a charted path, which can only be seen in the hands of a true king. The recording ends. Only in the hands of the true king. And Mara breaks the capsule so that no one else will find it. Before they leave, a bottle mysteriously gets unlocked from a small opening on the floor, and as they check what's inside, they see a map of where they should be headed in Italy. After they reach there, Mira enjoys moving around the beautiful city. Don't be wrong to judge a place I've never seen before. But she and Arthur eventually get to the spot marked on the map. As they then try to decode the message from the recording, Arthur realizes that one of the statues in the area has to hold the bottle they picked up at the temple. Arthur immediately places the bottle on a statue's hand, and it helps him and Mara to see where to go next. In the middle of the ocean, before they can leave, Manta shoots them near the statue, and Arthur gets hurt. As Manta continues to go after him, Mira tries to stop the other soldiers from doing anything, but they mention that they're also there for her because she committed treason. Following this, Mara runs away and starts thinking of how to kill them. Manta and Arthur also continue their fight, and they both land huge blows on each other. Manta's weapons and new suit give him an advantage, but Arthur refuses to go down easily. Arthur eventually asks him how he was found, and Manta says that Mira is the one being tracked. Just as Mira manages to kill the soldiers, Arthur also takes down Manta, who falls badly and hits some rocks repeatedly before he finally enters the sea. Mara then goes to help Arthur, who is really weak, but he still tells her that she's being tracked. Mara immediately realizes that the tracker is in her bracelet, so she destroys it, and Arthur passes out. Elsewhere on Atlantis, Orm takes his soldiers to the kingdom of the fishermen to speak to the king, Riku, about his war plans. Riku says he doesn't think starting a war is a good idea, but Orm calls him a coward and kills him. He then orders Riku's heir to organize the fishermen's army and get them ready for a trip to the last kingdom he needs before he can lead them to the surface for a war. Shortly after, Arthur wakes up on a boat and sees Mira playing a flute. She then tells him that she took the boat from the docks because the charted path has directed them to the kingdom of the trench. Arthur realizes that it's the same place Atlanta was sent to for her execution, and Mira mentions that it's now known as a place of death. She adds that no one knows what to expect down there. Arthur then suggests turning back and warning the humans of the war because he doesn't think he can be king anyway. However, Mira says she believes in him, and that she just needs him to realize that he's the right person to unite the land and sea. I can see that now. Shortly after, they get closer to their destination, but some creatures called the Trench come out to attack them. Mara and Arthur struggle to fight them off, but they eventually use flares to scare the creatures away as they enter the water to find the portal to the hidden sea Atlan sent them to. They eventually see the portal, but Mara says they won't be able to go through it together. Arthur believes they can, so he holds her hand and tries to go through. Unfortunately, the portal's energy blasts them apart, and Mara passes out. As some creatures are then about to eat her, someone comes out of nowhere and saves her. Following this, she gets dragged to the shore of the hidden sea, while Arthur still looks around for her. As Mara wakes up, the good Samaritan who saved her takes off her headgear, and she realizes that it's Atlanta. After Arthur also finds Mara, he sees his mom standing next to her and looks shocked. He then hugs her and asks how she's not dead. Atlanta tells Mara and Arthur that even though Orvax sent her to die, she fought for her life and survived. Arthur blames himself for what his mom had to go through, but Atlanta says it wasn't his fault. None of this is your fault. She adds that it's what she had to do to protect him and Tom. She then asks about Tom, and Arthur says that he still waits for her every morning to see if she'll show up. As Arthur then asks why she didn't come back, Atlanta mentions that the portal can't be used to go back. Arthur and Mara are shocked to hear this, and Atlanta says that the trident is the only thing they can use to leave. She also mentions that she has tried to retrieve it several times, but the trident is well guarded by a powerful creature known as a Carathan. Mara says they can fight together to beat it, but Atlanta tells her that it's of no use because only the true heir will be allowed to take the trident. She then tells Arthur that he's a hero who will save everyone. After she directs him to go behind a waterfall to find what he's looking for, Arthur goes through and immediately sees the trident in Atlan's hand. However, as he's about to go for it, the Carathan shows up and calls Arthur the least worthy of all the people who have ever come for the trident. He also tosses Arthur around while saying he's not worthy to be king because he's a half-breed. As the Carathan nearly kills him, Arthur tells him to stop. He then mentions that he knows he's not worthy, but that he came to get the trident because it's the only way he can save his people. The Carathan is shocked by this, and he mentions that no one has ever communicated with him since Atlan did many years ago. As he says that Arthur might be the true heir, he adds that the half-breed will have to wrestle the trident from Atlan Atlan's grip. Almost immediately, Arthur does just this, and he gains the powers of the trident. As he then returns to meet Mara and Atlanta, they look proud and call him the one true king. Elsewhere, Orm finds out that Vulko betrayed him by working with Arthur, and he gets his men to arrest his advisor. Instead of killing him, Orm tells his men to ensure that Vulko can watch when he takes down the surface dwellers from wherever he's being held. Shortly after, Orm leads Nereus and the fisherman army to the Brine Kingdom to get their king to surrender and fight in the war. Unfortunately, the Brine King refuses to join the war, and Orm says he'll have to kill him. Before he does this, though, everyone suddenly looks shocked to see a Carathin arriving at the scene. Arthur eventually appears on it with Atlan's trident, and as most people see this, they realize that he's truly the heir to Atlan's throne. Arthur then summons all the sea creatures to take down Orm's men. As they do this, Mara tells Arthur that there are already enough casualties, and that he needs to fight Orm alone. Arthur has doubts about the fight because he doesn't want to lose, but Mara tells him to take Orm to the surface of the ocean to fight. She then goes to meet Nereus to call back his men, because Arthur already had Atlan's trident. Nereus sees this and immediately tells his soldiers that the half-breed is their true king. After moving around the battleground, Arthur eventually baits Orm to follow him to the surface. As Orm gets there, he says he'll never let Arthur be king, and his half-brother says they'll have to fight for the throne. Meanwhile, Mara rescues Vulko and tells him that they need to help Arthur, but he says that everyone needs to see their true king defeat Orm. Just then, they watch the fierce battle and see Arthur overpower Orm. He then tells his half-brother to yield the throne, but Orm says that Arthur will have to kill him because it's how the fight has to end. Arthur refuses to do this, and he says he's not one of them anyway. Orm still insists that Arthur needs to kill him, but as he keeps shouting, Atlanta shows up and tells her kids to stop fighting. Orm looks shocked to see her, but she hugs him and says it's a long story. She then tells him that he needs to stop fighting his brother. She adds that whatever Orvax taught him is wrong, and that he needs to understand that the land and sea are meant to be one. Just then, Vulko shows up to arrest Orm. And Mara announces to everyone in Atlantis that Arthur is the new king. Arthur looks happy about this, and as he riles them up, they all chant his name. The next morning, Tom walks to the docks and looks shocked to see Atlanta waiting for him. He then says he's happy that she came back, and she hugs him.